Wallis Simpson, an American socialite whose romance with King Edward VIII led to his abdication, remains one of the most controversial figures in British royal history. Her story is a complex tale of love, scandal, and political intrigue, culminating in an event that reshaped the British monarchy. This article explores Wallis Simpson's life, her relationship with Edward V, and her lasting impact on British history. Bessie Wallace Warfield was born on June 19, 1896, in Blue Ridge Summit, Pennsylvania. Raised in a modest but well-connected family, Wallis experienced financial struggles after her father's death shortly after her birth. Her mother, Alice Montague, raised her with the help of wealthy relatives, and Wallis was exposed to upper-class society from an early age. Wallis's first marriage was to Earl Winfield Spencer Jr., a US Navy pilot in 1916. The marriage was troubled from the start due to Spencer's heavy drinking and long absences. They divorced in 1927. Shortly after, Wallis married Ernest Aldrich Simpson, a British-American shipping executive, and moved to London, where she became part of high society. It was during this period that she met Edward, then Prince of Wales, in 1931. Wallis's introduction to Edward, Prince of Wales, marked a turning point in her life. By 1934, the two had become lovers. Despite Wallis still being married to Ernest Simpson, the prince was infatuated with her. Wallis's charm, intelligence, and sophistication captivated Edward, who found her presence a refreshing contrast to the expectations placed upon him as heir to the throne. Their relationship quickly became a public scandal, especially as Wallis was not only a commoner but also a divorcee, twice. At the time, divorce was heavily stigmatised, especially for a member of the British royal family, who was expected to uphold moral standards. Edward's relationship with Wallis posed a direct threat to the monarchy and its public image. When Edward ascended to the throne in January 1936, following the death of his father George V, his relationship with Wallis became a constitutional crisis. The new king was adamant about marrying Wallis, but as the head of the Church of England, which opposed divorce, he faced an impossible situation. Marriage to a twice-divorced woman was deemed unacceptable by the British government, the Church, and the public. The Prime Minister, Stanley Baldwin, warned Edward that marrying Wallis would not be permitted while retaining the throne. Despite the mounting pressure, Edward was unwavering in his love and declared that he could not continue without her. Faced with the choice between the crown and the woman he loved, Edward chose Wallis. On December 11, 1936, Edward abdicated the throne, stating in a radio broadcast, "I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king, as I would wish to do without the help and support of the woman I love." It was an unprecedented act. No monarch in British history had ever voluntarily relinquished the throne, let alone for love. Edward's younger brother George VI assumed the throne, and Edward became the Duke of Windsor. The abdication shook the British public and cast Wallis as the woman who led a king to abandon his duty. She was perceived as a manipulative and ambitious social climber who had disrupted the monarchy. After the abdication, Wallis and Edward married on June 3, 1937, in a private ceremony in France. Wallis became the Duchess of Windsor, but she was denied the style of Her Royal Highness, a move that hurt Edward deeply and caused a rift between him and the rest of the royal family. The couple lived in exile for much of their lives, spending time in France, the United States, and occasionally visiting Britain under strict conditions. Despite their love story being romanticised by some, Wallis and Edward's marriage was not without its difficulties. Wallis reportedly felt trapped in the role that Edward's decision had forced upon her, and Edward struggled with the consequences of his abdication. They faced financial challenges as Edward's allowance was controlled by the British government, and their movements were closely monitored. The couple also faced political controversy. During World War II, they were suspected of harbouring pro-German sympathies. The Duke and Duchess of Windsor visited Adolf Hitler in 1937, which led to widespread speculation about their political leanings. Although there is no concrete evidence to suggest that they were actively collaborating with the Nazis, the visit damaged their reputation and led to increased scrutiny. In 1940, they were sent to the Bahamas, where Edward served as governor, a move that effectively kept them away from Europe during the war. Now, after the war, the Windsors returned to France, where they lived a relatively quiet life in their villa, La Croix, and later at the Villa Windsor in Paris. The couple became social fixtures in the international high society, mingling with celebrities and influential figures. However, Wallis's relationship with the British royal family remained strained. Although she and Edward occasionally attended royal events, they were largely isolated from the family. Edward's health declined in the 1960s, and he passed away in 1972. Wallis, who had always been the stronger partner in the relationship, was left alone. Her health also deteriorated, and she spent her final years in seclusion, largely looked after by her lawyer and staff. She passed away in 1986 and was buried next to Edward in the Royal Burial Ground near Windsor Castle, symbolically bringing her back to the country that had once rejected her. Wallis Simpson remains a divisive figure in history. Some view her as the woman who stole a king, a manipulative figure who schemed her way into power and wealth. Others see her as a tragic figure caught in circumstances beyond her control, a woman who genuinely loved Edward and made sacrifices for that love. It is clear, however, that her presence and influence fundamentally changed the British monarchy. Edward's abdication led to the reign of George VI, whose steady leadership during World War II restored the monarchy's stability and popularity. His daughter, Queen Elizabeth II, went on to become one of the most beloved and longest reigning monarchs in British history, a path that would not have been possible without Edward's abdication. Wallis's story also foreshadows the challenges faced by modern royals in balancing personal desires with public duties. Her legacy highlights the ongoing tension between love, duty, and the expectations placed upon those born into royalty. In many ways, Wallis's influence is still felt today, as contemporary members of the royal family navigate similar dilemmas in an increasingly scrutinising world. Wallis Simpson's life and the abdication crisis she precipitated continue to captivate historians and royal watchers alike. Her story is one of romance, controversy, and the complexities of love in the face of power. Whether seen as a villain or a victim, Wallis's legacy is a reminder of how one individual can reshape history. She was not just the woman who changed a king's life, but also the one who altered the course of the British monarchy forever.